As we begin this week, as an introduction, going into First Corinthians and by default also Second Corinthians, we come to today introducing, building off of what we've already looked at really the quest for spiritual power that we find very much in paganism, but also that we find very much in the church in or in the city of Corinth as well, that affects the church and how they act and how they live and what Paul's talking about. Because there's this quest for power that we see in our world today. It's really not changed in that regards. You can think very much remembering back to Acts chapter 8, where you have Simon the magician, and he sees the blessing of the healing done by the apostles and wanting, how can I have that for myself? So that I have that power, I have that control, I can use it for me. And very much the quest for spiritual power going on in Corinth very much was, how can I get this for me? And it best definitely is part of what Paul has to address as he goes forward into Corinthians for this congregation that he loved. Now you can find it in paganism very easily, a manipulation of the gods. So with all the many gods that they had, it was very much the gods have a power. And so what do I do to manipulate the gods to do what I want them to do? Whether it's rain, whether it's having children, whether it's winning in war, you pick it. Whether to have wealth. The point was the gods have power. And I need to try to manipulate the gods for them to do what I want them to do. That's the spiritual power. Whether it's the pursuit of pleasure, I can have power and control. Whether it's of self and philosophy, whether it's of rhetoric, manipulating people, manipulating by words, by smooth talk, by manipulating the emotions, which was definitely a part of the rhetoric that took place that we see very much in our politics of today, of manipulating the emotions in order to come to an end that we want. The quest for power, and whether or not it's a secular status, same thing, the quest for power. Now, knowing that a lot of that, the worship of gods, the worship of the philosophy, the rhetoric, all of this wrapped around the search for power. Now you have the church coming into Corinth, and you have this gift that's given to believers, the gift of the Spirit. And that Spirit, when you get to paganism or you get to Stoicism, the idea behind, and this is, we're going to see this definitely when you get, especially towards the end of First Corinthians, it was the Spirit is this divine cosmic force in paganism and in Stoicism, not in the church, but this divine force, very much having its roots in like Delphi, where you would have the priestess of Delphi giving forth prophecy. And words in Greek were, they were in God, they were full of God. And it was this ecstasy, this frenzy that the priestess would get into. And as she got into this frenzy, she would then be kind of in the God, in the Spirit. And then you would have this prophecy that would come forward. That's what you would have when you would go to Delphi, to be this in the Greek words, this light being, almost this kind of in the clouds being as you're there. Now, as Paul comes forward, he's fighting against that basic idea, because you have this in the culture, it does creep into the church. And he states very clearly, and this is why Paul states this throughout First Corinthians about the Holy Spirit, that the Holy Spirit is not to create a frenzy. The Holy Spirit is not to create an ecstasy. The Holy Spirit can never be separated from the cross. The Holy Spirit can never be separated from the actions of Jesus Christ. For the Spirit directs us to our salvation. The Spirit directs us to the cross. The cross is the spearhead. It is not to manipulate God. It is God in charge, which is completely foreign to basically the entire belief system in Corinth. God in charge, God doing the action. And so continuously throughout First Corinthians, Paul preaches in weakness and trembling. Paul preaches as gifted. Paul preaches that we live by faith, not by sight, not by emotion, but by faith. And faith and emotion are not equal. Just as we would say that the intellect and faith are not equal. Are they a piece and parcel? We see that, absolutely. But they are not equal. And so the point continuously is the Spirit is at work, and He loves, and He cares, and the Spirit directs us to the cross, a stumbling block. And yet the Spirit makes that faith right there. That's where Paul goes and is leading the people once again in Corinth. May we follow in that same way of the cross and Jesus crucified. In that name,